Welcome to the Moto Curious. We're here to increase access and inclusion in motorsports, especially motorcycling, one question and answer at a time. I'm your host, Sarah Lobkovich. I'm a highly trained, still slow motorcyclist, but the rider I am today is not the rider I'll always be, right, Coach Nick? I'm a longtime GP racing fan, and I co-own C-Dub Moto Racing with my husband, Chris. For 2023, we're campaigning in Moto America Superbike with Benjamin Smith on the C-Dub Moto Yamaha R1 and providing technical support for Mallory Dobbs with her independent Mallory Dobbs Racing Supersport program and her Ducati Richmond Super Hooligans program. Along with our partner, Law Tigers of Washington, we are also delighted to be supporting racing here at home as a co-title sponsor of WMRA, the Washington Motorcycle Road Racing Association. In addition to our race program, Chris operates Counterweight Motorsport, a Pacific Northwest race shop focused on excellence and innovation, where we build fast bikes for serious riders. We also provide race-proven general service and repair services for our street riders. At C-Dub Moto Racing, we focus on developing hardworking talent who may not otherwise have access to the national paddock in our sport. Drop me your questions at sarah@cdubmoto.com. That's SARA at CWmoto.com. And we're at CDub_Moto everywhere on social and at the Moto Curious on Instagram. If you're hearing my voice, you belong here. And I'm excited to have you as part of our community of motorcycle curious people. So let's get this episode started. Hey friends, I am super excited to share this episode of the Moto Curious with you. I got the chance a couple weeks ago to sit down with Jesse Murphy, the owner and operator of Cascade Motorcycle Safety here in the Pacific Northwest. And Jesse and I met a few years ago, and we talk about that during our conversation, the circumstances of how we met and why we've stayed in touch. We also talk about Cascade Motorcycle Safety, which is the business that Jesse operates, which is an incredible training and learning environment for motorcyclists in Washington State. I actually recommend their classes to people, even if you have to travel to participate in them. They have courses and learning experiences and community for fun on your motorcycle that we don't see in most motorcycle training organizations. Their name is Cascade Motorcycle Safety, but I remember when we started working with Jesse last year on their sponsorship of our race team, C-Dub Moto Racing, I remember Jesse saying, I wish I'd named it Cascade Motorcycle Fun instead of Cascade Motorcycle Safety, because part of the way that they work is that, yes, it is about learning, it is about safety training, but the message is that learning how to improve your skills on your bike makes riding more fun and less stressful. So I'm going to just get us right into the interview. Jesse and I had a very long conversation, so I've tried to edit this to a length that you can listen to during a commute or a dog walk. We might share some shorts though, because there were some really good bits that we had to cut to get this down. So I don't think this is the last you'll hear from Jesse on the Moto Curious. Before we roll the interview though, I wanted to let you know we are now into our Moto America season. C-Dub Moto Racing recently announced that we are stepping up to Superbike. The move from Stock 1000 to Superbike is a huge one for our little team. It also came ahead of schedule, but when we saw the Moto America schedule for this season come out and there were some shifts to the Stock 1000 calendar and number of race rounds, when we saw that Stock 1000 wasn't going to be running in the West Coast races, we had to make a really tough decision about whether to change bike platforms to operate in another class or whether to step up to Superbike earlier than we planned. So we decided on door number 2. We are recently back from our first race round as a Superbike team. We are really excited to be working with Benjamin Smith this year. He finished 4th in the Supersport Championship last year. Really talented guy. I'm really personally impressed with his work ethic. And the first time I got to work with Ben was on the ground for the first race round in Atlanta. I was really impressed with the intelligence that I saw in his race decision making. So the team is very excited to work with Ben and with his sponsor, John Cook, who is the operator of Track Day Winner, track day organization that operates mostly in the southeast of the US. I will, of course, share more about our Moto America season as we get into the season. We're headed to Barber Motorsports Park in Birmingham, Alabama next. They mixed up the order of the race rounds for this year compared to the last few. So I'm excited and a little nervous to go to Barber this early in the season, but we'll be there with Ben on our Superbike, and then we're also providing some technical support to Mallory Dobbs. Mallory's riding her Cowie in Supersport this year with her independent program, Mallory Dobbs Racing. She's also riding the Ducati Richmond Hypermotard in Super Hooligans. So we'll see Mallory on the Hooligan next at the Ridge Round later this season, our home round. In the meantime, I just want to give a big thank you to Jesse for joining us today. I also want to give a huge thank you to Jesse and his team for the support that you all provide for C-Dub Moto Racing. And of course, some extra love to Derek Roberts and Law Tigers of Washington for reintroducing me to Jesse last season. So now we'll hit play on my conversation with Jesse from Cascade Motorcycle Safety. Well, thank you so much for making the time to get together. I know this is like long overdue. So
I know.
I'm glad we were able to make it work. Jesse and I met, I don't remember how many years ago. And I don't know if I've even told you the whole story of that day. I was coaching for a track day org at the time. And the track day org that I worked with had a shared day with Jesse's org, Cascade Motorcycle Safety. It was a split day. So we had 2 track day sessions, and then Jesse's group had the 3rd session for a skills, like street strategies on the track, advanced training on the track. And I had an awful day at that track day. That combined format where we have a slow intermediate group and then intermediate fast group, it makes the slow group faster. And I was coaching a brand new rider, and it was I will say it was not my most fun day on the racetrack. And so every time I'd come off the track and I'd look over and see your group like smiling and having a blast, like I wanted to hand my student off to you that day because she would have had so much more fun with you guys. And so I met you and Brandy that day and was just so excited to see that it's so hard to find options for awesome training. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But I was really excited to meet you guys and see that you're doing this so close to home. So tell me who you are and what you do, Jesse.
Okay, well, I'm Jesse Murphy. I own Cascade Motorcycle Safety with my wife, Brandy. I've been involved in coaching most of my life, actually. I started coaching professionally in snow sports in the 90s, and then started as a motorcycle coach in the early 2000s. And it kind of feels like a support group. I am addicted to motorcycles. I love motorcycles. I like riding, and I like helping other people become dependent on riding their motorcycle every single day. It's just my thing. I've been riding a long time. And it's just the enthusiasm never wanes. And I'm always looking for the next time I get on my bike.
Tell me, what is Cascade and how'd you get started there?
Yeah, so Cascade is a motorcycle school. Most of what we do is fairly familiar to most riders. We do classes using the Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculum, and that includes testing for your motorcycle endorsement. That's the pathway a lot of riders take getting into riding street bikes and getting licensed. We also provide a lot of other programs beyond that, but that's kind of the meat and potatoes. And we're up here in Northwest Washington, Skagit County, Whatcom County, Island, and kind of up where it's unfortunately not very springy yet, but a wonderful place to be, and got a lot of great places to go ride up here. So we feel very fortunate to be up here.
Yeah, I think it started hailing during my last meeting.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
I'm ready for spring, Jesse.
Yeah, I am too. Although yesterday the game was like, how amazingly awesome is my riding gear doing, keeping me dry and warm today?
Oh, that's so good.
That was the performance award of the day. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll come back. I have more questions for you about Cascade Motorcycle Safety, but first I just want to hear more about your story. So you said you've been coaching for a long time, kind of came out of snow sports. That's interesting. I kind of climbing and snow sports and motorcycling all at the same time. So
nice.
But how did you originally get into motorsports and motorcycling?
Big part of it was family. And so my grandfather, Chet, was a huge influence on me. And of course, my dad, riding with him. I started out on the front, of course, because I was tiny, on his Honda 450 Scrambler, which I actually have that bike in the garage right now. We're working on refreshing it a little bit. But when I was that young, so I got to sit up front, which is amazing. And like the handlebars had like a crossbar because it was like a scrambler. And I remember my dad had this blue velour bathrobe and he took the belt off of it. And so he tied us together with this blue velour bathrobe belt to make sure I didn't fall off. Because I had this bad habit. So we'd go for a ride, and I can remember like we'd go visit his friends Ken and Yvette that lived kind of on the other side of the valley. And I wouldn't always stay awake on the ride home. So it was good to be tied together, and there's scratches on the tank from my helmet. I had like the old 3/4 helmets, had little snaps on the brow. There's a scratch or two on the tank from my helmet falling asleep. And of course so I'm a little kid, and I had these, really cool, for a little kid, cowboy boots. That was my motorcycle riding boots. And so my foot on the one side could rest on the engine case. And then on the other side, I could rest it on the heat shield for the pipes because it had high scrambler pipes on it. And so there's still a little stain from some of the sole of my boot on the exhaust pipe.
Oh my goodness. So. I knew when you said bathrobe belt, I was like, he's fallen asleep. Like that's definitely our era of parenting version of a safety equipment.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't have your kid falling off your motorcycle.
Of course not.
So you gotta make sure they're attached. But just such great memories. And, I remember one of my favorite things when I'd be riding, just cruising down the highway, is when you'd get into an area where the sunshine is like coming really far from the side and just makes that big shadow of the wheel to the side and in front of you. And I would just watch that forever. Is mesmerizing. And, I just really like that stuff. And it was a lot of fun. So that's kind of where it started for me, is just being with my family and doing that. And pretty much my entire life growing up, I'm like, well, this is great. Although I must say, I've done a lot of things on motorcycles and had a huge amount of fun, but not being responsible for riding the bike, but still getting to sit up front as a 3-year-old, that is the pinnacle of the most amazing motorcycling you can have. And I remember as I got older, graduated somewhat, to the back seat of the bike because I was getting too tall to sit in front of my dad. I was like, well, this is okay. I have to look around.
It's a step down.
Yeah, it's a step down. Now I really, really need to learn how to ride my own motorcycle because that's just going to be a lot better. But yeah, so that's kind of where it started. I discovered skateboarding and snowboarding, and that was something that I could do without any supervision. So that was pretty great as a young child. And so I did a lot of that, really poured my effort. And then so once I was in high school, that's when I was able to get really serious about riding, get my first street bike. And once I had my first street bike, that was pretty much how I got around as much as I could. Unless there was snow and ice on the ground, I was on my bike, which was a lot of fun. I remember strapping my snowboard and my riding gear to the back seat of the bike and riding across town to catch a ride up to the mountain in the springtime to go snowboard. And so that was pretty exciting and lots of fun. But yeah, and then so pretty much since high school, I've been on the streets riding around and did my fair share of rather silly things.
Learning experiences.
Oh my God. Yeah. I remember the first time that I just dropped the clutch and went. I was leaving school in the afternoon and kind of going down a side street. I'm just being a teenager. And I'm just like, yeah, all right. And I just went, clicked through about 3 gears. No idea how fast I'm going at all, but it was fast. And just the side streets, because this is just like a neighborhood street, and the side streets and the driveways are coming up, like in Star Wars, just when I'm like, this is just monumentally stupid, and just rolled out of it. And I'm like, that was super exciting, but I need to find a better place to go do that, because that could have been terrifying. So, but yeah, you grow up through that. But I was really fortunate. My mentors were Grandpa Chet and my dad and his brother, and just really good heads-on straight riders. Mm-hmm. And I got to spend so much time riding motorcycles with them that made a big difference for me. That was really kind of my mentorship and my training. Actually, there wasn't too much available at that time, education-wise, in Montana. They did have a state-run program, but I didn't really know about it. And the classes would sell out because they'd maybe do like a dozen classes a summer. That was it for the whole state. And so I think it was like 3 years, maybe 3 years or so into riding. I was kind of like, what the heck? I'll take a class and, see if I can get some coaching on this and stuff. So I did. And it was a huge amount of fun. And it was funny, Montana's a pretty small state and riding community. So both of my coaches in that class were people that I'd already known and ridden with. And so it was kind of cool. And then the other thing is I took that class with my best friend who did not have a motorcycle license. And he putted around a little bit. His dad had always been a street rider, pretty much commuted back and forth on his motorcycle. And so we took the class together. So that was part of the impetus to do it, was to do the class with Josh. And that was pretty fun. He ended up getting his license, and, he'd take my bike around a little bit now and again. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, lots of experimentation for sure.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah. So yeah. But fortunately, I had really great mentors around me, and it's not such a bad thing for a person to grow up in a smaller community where people know who you are.
Yep. Yeah. It
helps you.
I was just I had an incredible Lyft driver, Parrish. I hope you're listening. I had an incredible Lyft driver when I was in Baltimore last week, and we were talking about the difference between, for example, me growing up in Port Townsend, where the police officers were officer friendly. Yeah. And then the difference my husband had growing up in PG County in the 80s, where, different places, different things, different life experiences for sure. Totally. And I'm grateful my early speeding, not that I would ever speed, of course.
Oh, no, of course
but I'll say I'm grateful my early learning experiences were in Port Townsend and not somewhere else. Yeah, I'm with you.
Totally.
Well, it's so cool to hear you talk about that kind of 3-year-old Jessie on the bike and remembering everything that it actually I do a lot of appreciative inquiry work in my day job. That's when we look at like, instead of what's going wrong and how do we fix it, we look at what's going well and how do we do more of it. And
nice.
Listening to you tell that story, it was like, this is a peak moment story I'm listening to right now. Like the way that you remember it and the impact that it had on you, it's like, that's pretty cool to hear a peak moment happening at 3 years old on a motorcycle. Explains kind of, that, and then having that mentorship and having motorcycles be so normal. One of the things I love about you is you do it all. You love it all. Like, I don't think I know anyone else who's got like, you're a racing fan, you're a racing supporter, you support us in CW Moto. We were up with you and Cascade a couple weeks ago in Mount Vernon.
Backcountry Discovery Route Expedition documentary.
The
Their names are so long. Yep.
The Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route movie screening, which was amazing.
So much fun.
Yeah, it's been really fun. We got reintroduced. I have to give a shout out to Derek at Law always. Tigers, because Derek, it was last year, I think early in the year, Derek was like, you know what, you guys should know each other. And I'm like, wait, we already do.
Yeah.
It's just been a while. And so a big thank you to Derek for making that reconnection. But it is like every time we get together, it's like you do it all. There's kind of nothing you don't do in the sport, which I think is just really cool.
Yeah. And I've always been looking for new experiences. And I don't know, there's so much fun to have on a motorcycle. And now, granted, I'm in a very unique position to have a lot of experiences on motorcycles, which I'm so fortunate for. Yeah. But, there are a lot of experiences that really everybody can kind of, get into. Yeah, like we went, because I'm a huge fan of motorcycle racing, especially road racing. And really, if I'm honest, I'm a sport bike rider at heart. That's really where I'm at. I ride all the different kinds of motorcycles and I enjoy them all. And I have pretty much every costume you can have in the closet. And it's really fun. And, sometimes it's like, ooh, it's kind of Halloween motorcycle style, which is totally cool. We did a trip in February to Vegas. We went to a trade show down there. And I'm like, well, gosh, we're in the desert. It's February. We need to get some big American touring bikes and ride around in the desert with the stereo on because we're in Vegas. You got to do it.
When in Vegas. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we did. It was an absolute hoot and so much fun. And, I don't have Harley in the garage right now, but it's kind of one of those things of like, there's times when I'm ready to be on a bagger, cruising around with the rock and roll station on the radio. And then there's other times where on my sport bike or I'm on my adventure bike, or lately the new thing I'm trying to not look terribly silly doing is riding trials motorcycles.
Wow.
Which are so much fun. Just an absolute hoot. Although a total workout.
Seriously. That's one of the things, I am also a sport bike girl at heart, but lately, due to some health issues, I'm not able to do what I have always done. Like I have to pace myself on the sport bikes. And so that's one of the things I'm most excited about this season is knowing you guys. And the last time I saw Brandy, she was like, just come ride in the front yard, like, come on up, And so the idea, knowing that if I'm in a season where I might not necessarily be working on personal bests on the racetrack, I can come out to a gymkhana. I can, there's still lots of new things to learn and practice and work on in the sport that that happen at the pace that my vision moves at right now, that is different than it used to be.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And there's just so many things you can do. And I think that's an important thing for people to take stock to that every once in a while and be like, let me do a little bit different riding, just to have a different experience. Doesn't even necessarily have to be on a different bike, but for someone who only rides recreationally on the weekend, pack your lunch and your coffee in a thermos and commute to work.
Mm-hmm.
and do something a little different and just get a different experience for what you're doing. I think that is a really valuable thing.
I hadn't thought about that. One of the things I love about Cascade is, I mean, seeing you guys operate, I could see that, let's just be honest, like learning how to ride a motorcycle and then getting into the sport is a leaky pipeline. There are people who are probably, I mean, I hear it all the time. I'd love to learn to ride, but I'm just too scared, like too nervous, or I don't know where to start. And so I carry around a huge pile of your business cards. I have told people in Alabama to fly on out for a weekend to come see us.
Heck yeah.
Anywhere in the country, come on out, book ahead because Cascades events tend to sell out. But, but lack of access to training shouldn't be a barrier. There are great options out there, but it was one of the things I was most impressed with seeing you guys operate, because I didn't have mentors starting out. I just decided I wanted to do this.
Nice.
And took my training and kind of stayed in the sport despite my training. And so then to get to see folks having a great time with your events and see not only do you patch up that leaky pipeline by being inclusive and fun and, emphasizing that the learning helps you have more fun on the bike, but also that you have such diversity of events also helps the leaky pipeline. Because, folks like me who might have hit a point where I can't necessarily do what I've always done on the bike. Mm-hmm. But now, thanks to you guys, I know there's a million other ways to ride a motorcycle. Like I can stay in the sport, even if I'm in a season where it's a little different for me. Mm-hmm. So how did you kind of compare? I mean, I'm not going to say compared to other educational offerings, but like, how did you wind up so focused on inclusion and fun in your programs with Cascade?
It's been kind of the whole journey as a coach and my own education a little bit. I actually got into being a coach in snow sports, like I mentioned. I had been an athlete in high school in regional competition for snowboarding. I raced snowboards and also competed in freestyle. Huge amount of fun, tons of work, tons of pretty hard work. And the way I did it, I really kind of wore myself out. I ended up kind of getting very sick, mostly because of just doing too much. And that kind of brought an end to my junior year of high school. So I didn't get to finish. And at that point in time, I've always enjoyed learning things and learning how to do new things. I've always liked that. But then on the other hand, I had some really suboptimal experiences in school. And it really kind of came to a head once I got sick and wasn't able to finish my junior year, because then it had to go back and be like, okay, so, what are we going to do here? How do we go forward, with high school? And I had some supportive teachers. And then I had some other teachers were like, just go get your GED and get yourself a job at McDonald's. And I'm like, wow, okay. And of course, trying to recover from I was sick for like a month and a half or something like that, including being in the hospital for a while. And so just kind of come to recover. And so by the end of the summer, I had a friend of mine who suggested, hey, you should see about being a snowboard coach up at the mountain this winter. And I was like, never thought about that. And then that person started talking to the other persons in my circles, and they're like, we should all just kind of gang up on him to tell him to go do this. So definitely my life has been filled with great mentors and people looking out for me. So I did. I got involved in coaching, absolutely loved doing it. And I found myself in an environment of learning new things and really progressed really quickly in that profession. You can't make assumptions on the front end of, well, who's going to be a motorcycle rider and who's not going to be a motorcycle rider, who's going to be a snowboarder and who's not be, or who's going to be a high school graduate and who's not going to be. And that's a really important point for me, is that pretty much anything that you can get education for, support for, these are all things that humans can do. A human being can ride a motorcycle. The level of support an individual human being might need to ride a motorcycle competently, well, that can be drastically different between individuals, and that's okay. But these things are for bringing joy into the lives of humans. So if you're in that group, you can be a rider. And that's where I feel that the education aspect has to really come from. We're here to support a journey and to give good and reasonable feedback and mentorship. But at the end of the day, we're here to help foster and continue the dreams of the people that want to do it. And I think that's like anything in life. If you want to do something, it does have to come from your own passion and your own desire. But those that support you in that shouldn't be putting up roadblocks to that. They should be ready to help and ready to provide, ready to keep you honest, because you need that in life and in development, but to really be in your corner. So that's a big part of it for me, is that it has to be fun. It has to be inclusive. It has to be about fostering the passion, because then you're going to get good at it.
Right. It's so cool. There's so much emphasis on naturals in our sport, and same thing in snow sports. I mean, there's so much emphasis on natural talent and on being a natural. And I know when we got into, for me as a coach, for me as a learner, and then me as a coach, I wasn't a natural at any of this. It's all passion, and right. So I'm really grateful for having found coaches that could see that I might not be a natural, but man, I am stubborn AF and I am gonna figure it out. And so in snow sports and in motorcycling, same thing. Like I found great coaches that helped me stay in the sport and helped cement my love of the sport.
Yes.
But boy, in racing, since I've moved into professional racing, it's almost hard. There's so much emphasis on that natural talent that we occasionally work with naturals who need to learn how to be athletes. And who need to learn how to put in the work. And that's not to say they're not putting in a lot of work. It's just, you're a little unique because I think you were a natural, but you get it. Like you get that not everybody is, and you're able to help riders who, I appreciate what you said about you can't look at somebody and know who's going to be a motorcyclist, because for a lot of my years on motorcycles, people have looked at me and said, you're not going to be a motorcyclist. And there are certain things I'm not the best in the world at, but I also really love the role I get to play in the sport.
Yeah, exactly.
And without folks kind of inviting and helping patch up that leaky pipeline, we just lose too many. We lose too many folks from the sport.
Totally. Because it can't be a thing where, people feel that you have to be, a certain way, a certain level, or enjoy certain aspects of it. It has to be down to the passion of the person. Sometimes you watch Instagram and you're like, well, if you're not doing 12 o'clock wheelies and stoppies, then why
are you even out here? Yeah.
Do you even ride, bro? And it's like, well, there's so many aspects to riding a motorcycle and so many reasons and joys from it. And it doesn't have to be a death-defying thing. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And it can be everything from a very peaceful exploration of the world around you to, very much an athletic pursuit. But it's not for us to say, what that is for the riders. That's for the rider to choose.
Yep.
And reach out to get support in fulfilling those dreams and that joy. So yeah.
Well, what excites you most about the present and the future you see for motorcycles and motorsports?
I think that there's so many more places for motorcycling in people's lives. You see, and I see there's a lot of, I don't know that splintering is the right word, but just a huge amount of variation right now in a powered two-wheeler. Frankly, you look at a lot of these larger e-bikes, electric bikes, and it's like, let's see, got a two-wheel frame, motor.
Yep.
I think in around 1890, they would have called that a motorcycle.
Yep.
It's the same thing, but it's totally cool. It's a different avenue. It's a different aspect of it. But I think that that's one of the really exciting things right now is that people are discovering and in some cases inventing different aspects and pursuits and pathways for what is essentially motorcycling, and whether or not, we even call it motorcycling, it's maybe e-cycling in the future, and that's okay. It's really a very similar thing. So I think that's really cool, just the way that the basis of what the core, I guess, joys of a motorcycle, how much is spreading into things that might look like slightly different pursuits, but really at the end of the day aren't. It's that individual freedom of mobility on a very elegant and sophisticated but simple machine. And I think that's something that brings a lot of spark to the human spirit. There's something about moving with a machine that way, even if it's, a bicycle with a cart in the spokes, there's a magic to that. And so I see a lot of magic out there. And so that's what I'm probably most excited about, is just how much magic there is out there. And I think that's on the uptick and how much there is.
Yeah, it makes me I coach in a lot of different directions, but in my day job coaching, there are moments where I work with folks who don't have a passion outlet in their existence. It's often knowledge workers. So folks that, that get up, that sit at a computer, that don't necessarily, and some who would love what they do, but who don't have that element of their life that gets them outside with the wind in their hair or against your helmet or, whatever the case may be. And it is really hard for me because of my dual life to not say, you should try motorcycling. Like, what's the thing? Like, is there that thing that you think, well, I've always wanted to, but I could never? Like, what is I've always wanted to, but I could never, because you can. And it's just a matter of, finding a way to try or to get started. So that's my thing. I wish that, I can't say that to my corporate coaching clients,
I know.
but I want to a lot. It's that,
oh, totally.
What would light you up? And I feel lucky that I've got a few different of those things in my life, but I'm really grateful for, folks like you, folks like my great coaches that I had that helped keep me in the sport, because it takes great mentors and coaches to keep folks in the sport. Tell me what you're excited about with Cascade this season.
Actually, personally, the Gymkhana sessions, I didn't get to ride enough of those at all last year. And so I'm super excited to get out to more of those this year. There's a few loose ends I've been working on my riding, and that's kind of my favorite place to go, kind of laboratory stuff out, because there's so much I can do there. So I enjoy that a lot. And it's an absolute hoot being there, meeting riders and just having a good time. And that's one of my highlights of riding, is being there for that.
For folks that don't know what Gymkhana is, tell us about Gymkhana.
So Cascade Gymkhana, well, we're on a podcast. Let's go long form here a little bit. So anyway, in Japan, years and years ago, there was this thing called Moto Gymkhana was developed, and it was actually started off as a competitive pursuit. And so probably the easiest thing for any of us in America to kind of correlate it to somewhat, well, I mean, if you're a motorhead, is it's kind of like autocross for motorcycles. And so there's these courses that are set up, and it's a time trial, so against the clock, and it's all challenging turns and maneuvers and figures and things like that. And you watch it, you can find videos on YouTube, you watch it, and it's like, wow, the people that, compete in this, just amazing, absolutely amazing. It also just looks really fun because it's like, oh my gosh, lots of like maneuvering and turning, and there's fast and there's slow and all sorts of different stuff. So anyway, I've always kind of had an eye on it last number of years. And then I saw a YouTube video, and I'm assuming that there's more than one place that has this, but I found this video from a place in Japan. Basically, it is a motorcycle country club. And they have like these big paved lots, and they have set up all these like Gymkhana figures set up. And it's just like, different sections have different stuff set up. And I mean, it's like a golf country club. Get on your bike, leave the house in the morning, go into the country club, you have a membership and whatever, and you spend your day out there riding figures, having fun, having a hoot, working on your riding, whatever. And I was like, wow. Yeah, I want that. I want to do that. So that's where we developed Cascade Gymkhana from, is to have a place where riders can come ride and do it for whatever reason that they need to. Some of us get the stopwatch out now and again, especially when the talk gets a little thick, and it just
Always
see
racing.
who.
Always
Yes,
racing.
always racing. It does happen. But no, for the most part, it's just a place to ride and on your own terms as a rider. So we see a lot of folks like fresh out of their first time motorcycle training. They just got their bike. They want to spend some time on their bike, working it, doing way more than you're going to do on public roads, but in a safe environment. And they're not looking for a coach to, be like, giving them a punch list of a dozen different things after each lap.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, they might be able to get some feedback from the other riders there. They might learn something from watching the other riders, but mainly just ride. And then we also have some riders that we see often at Gymkhana that are absolute expert riders. And this is kind of the outlet of,
right.
I need to, be at 110% of traction for 3 hours. And this is where they can do that.
Yeah. Demonstrating the mastery of the sport. Yeah.
Exactly.
And working toward mastery. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so that's really what Cascade Gymkhana is about. It's about having a place to ride where you can actually work on your riding and experiment and play around, very free form, and also, kind of network with other riders and get that support and feedback from others, and which a lot of times is just, and I see it all the time at a Gymkhana session. Somebody will go out on a figure like I think one you and I have talked about before. We have one called On Your Ass, and that's modeled after the Dutch TT. And so it's got all sorts of diabolical right-hand corners and the chicane and all that. Because, of course, we're huge MotoGP fans here. And I remember seeing somebody put a line together through like Harbacht. And you could just see all the other riders like, oh, God. And then every single other rider, like, okay, that's the line. And that's fun, just that communal growth, that riding together, watching each other, learning from her. That's an aspect of mentorship that a lot of us don't have access to. That's part of what I had growing up, is I could always ride with my dad and my grandfather and get some really solid mentorship, but not a lot of riders have that. And, we do see a lot more riders coming into this sport that they're not maybe from a motorcycle family. This is where the conversation sounds a little bit like Hogwarts. It's like, are your parents muggles, or are they actual riders? Yeah. But everybody's coming together to participate and learn from each other. And so it's kind of that whole group community mentorship and building. And it's an absolutely great time. So it's a 3-hour riding session. We do them on Sundays. Mainly, we schedule them so that as coaches, we're free to go ride. Because this is definitely one of those things where we're like, I want to do this as a rider. So
well, we've talked a lot about working in this business. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. Like, you have to make sure that you get it can't be all work.
Yes.
You have to maintain the love of the sport. And so, you set those for when you can be there and enjoy them, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It makes a massive difference.
Well, Jesse, is there anything that I didn't ask you today that I should have?
Oh, boy. That's always the hardest question for me, because I'm just like, once I get a push and a cue, I guess the biggest thing is, my biggest message for the world is, hey, get on your bike, ride your motorcycle. Don't worry about what clique you fit in. Don't worry about how you like to ride. I mean, hey, you like to go push a Harley Davidson bagger way too fast on curvy roads, or even take it to a racetrack? Good. Go do it. Or, oh my gosh, you want to, tour 2-up on a 150 Honda Dual Sport? Fine. Do it. Go out there, ride motorcycles. Find where the joy for you is. And just get that. You don't have to fit any preconception. All you have to do is ride your motorcycle. Yeah. And of course, I like to ride with everybody. So come ride with me, because it'll be fun. And I look forward to it.
So true. And so good. It's my Port Townsend's kind of tagline is, we're all here because we're not all there. And that's how I feel about motorcycling. It's so funny when we see the clicks, because it's like, we're all here because we're not all there. So you do you, man. Mm-hmm. I had a girlfriend say the other day, don't yuck someone else's yum.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we were really early. I was a really early adopter of the baggers racing. Like, I watched the exhibition, and I was the very first exhibition, and I was glued to it and couldn't. I just think there's no limit to what we can try in the sport. Just give it a whirl. Find your people. Yeah, give it a whirl.
Totally. Yep.
Well, Jesse, I just want to thank you for the role that you play in the sport, that you and Cascade play. It's every time I get the gift of seeing you guys operate, I can see there are people who are going to stay in the sport because of that experience they just had. And man, this sport needs every participant to stay in it that we can get.
Oh, for sure.
And more invited. So I just really appreciate what you guys do. It's really fun to see. And of course, we love that you've adopted us.
I know.
It's just so much fun to get to partner with you guys.
Oh yeah.
And we had a contingent from Cascade out at the Moto America races at the Ridge last season, some of your coaches and folks, and oh my gosh, it was just a blast. It was so cool to see, they rode down, and then to see folks like really get into the sports side. So I'm just really, we're loving.
They loved it.
Oh, it was so much fun. It's so much fun to have fans come out. And so folks who are listening, C-Dub and the Moto Curious and Jesse at Cascade and Derek at Law Tigers and a few, Tim at Smarty Pants. And, there are a couple other folks around. We're going to make sure that we have a pretty rad ridge around this season with some pre-events. And we're going to try and put together a ride out to the Saturday, Sunday races. So stay tuned.
That'll be so fun.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse. It's awesome to finally make this happen.
I know. This is excellent.
And tell me where folks can find more information about Cascade.
Okay. So on the internet, our main website is cascademotosafety.com. We also have a couple of other sister sites for some specialty programs. There is ProRider NW. ProRider is police-style motorcycle training for mere mortals and regular people like us. And then there is Cascade Moto Service, where you can find out about getting lessons in how to maintain your motorcycle, which helps greatly once you start putting a lot of miles on it, because then it's going to need some care and feeding. So we try to support the whole aspect of getting out there and finding as much joy as possible on motorcycles.
And then on the socials, where are you?
We're on Facebook, Cascade Moto Safety on Facebook, and Instagram handle is the same, Cascade Moto Safety. And don't be alarmed. There will definitely be more posts with Dr. Seuss characters and things like that.
You do you, man.
We have a really hard time being super serious on social media.
That's great. And then I know I mentioned before your events tend to sell out. So folks that really want the early scoop, do you have an email newsletter?
So what we have is for the specific events on our website, we do have email signups so that you can get on a list for that specific event. So as soon as the information is ready, it'll go right to your inbox. So you'll be the first to know. Some of our events with those sorts of things, we also send out the information emails a little bit ahead of making it publicly live, just to give those folks that have gone through the effort and get some information, a little head start on their planning on that. So check that out on the website.
Yeah. And listeners, that's not artificial scarcity. One of the things that we thought we would do as a team that is sponsored by Cascade is help drive awareness of your events. And so far it's been like, we have an event coming. We prep our social. It's sold out by the time we hit send. So that's not artificial scarcity. If you're wanting to get the early word, definitely share that email address and then you'll hear before things sell out.
Yep.
All right. Well, Jesse, thank you so much. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Sarah. This is amazing. It's so much fun. So glad to be on with you.
All right, friends, that's all for today. Remember, drop me your questions at sarah@cdubmoto.com. I am a without an H, so it's SARA@cwmoto.com. And we are CDub_moto everywhere in social media and the Moto Curious on Instagram. You can also join our behind the scenes community. It's hosted on Mighty Networks. It's awesome. We'll put some messages up about where to find that in our social media. You can click through, and then if you really want to connect, that's the place to do it. We share extra behind the scenes updates and content from the paddock that we don't share other places, since that is a smaller, more intimate community of our closest fans and friends. But if you're hearing this, you are welcome there as well. So check out our social media and you'll find more information about the C-Dub Moto America behind the scenes community that we host on Mighty Networks. Thanks so much. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. We're looking to get heard by more folks who are curious about this sport. We try really hard to reach race fans as well as their families, and spouses and friends and other people who, goodness gracious, don't understand why we do this, but are curious about it nonetheless. So we'd love your word of mouth. And thanks again for tuning in.